It's 2019 at the Arnold Strongman Classic in Columbus, Ohio, one of the 4 biggest strongman competitions of the year. 10 competitors from around the world who qualified through various means are now competing in the first event of the day, the deadlift. Each competitor has 3 attempts to pull up their heaviest lift, and the scoring for this event is given based on a ranking comparing everyone's bests. Based on history, there are 2 favorites in this event, and the 2 previous champions, although inclined to save their energy for the following events, would bring a fire into this battle that would leave the others in their dust, and perhaps push themselves beyond their limit.
And that goes up easily. Gravity is not a problem for that man with 955 pounds, and that goes up. And Brian Shaw stands up 1,021 pounds, and that is a personal best for him.
Wow.
Give me a break! How easy is that? And a new world record, 1,045 pounds for the mountain.
For Hafthor's second lift, he would manage to break the world record for the elephant bar deadlift. At this point in the competition, Hafthor had a 71-pound lead over everyone else, but only a 24-pound lead over Brian Shaw. It was clear Hafthor did such a lift in order to gain a lead over Shaw, and to put an exclamation point on it, Brian Shaw would respond to this by setting his final attempt for 1,051 pounds, 30 pounds heavier than his previous personal record, which he struggled with on the way up. Regardless, in order to take back the lead and win the first event in the competition, Brian Shaw would attempt to find another level to his already tested strength.
It will not go for him, and that means that Hafthor Bjornsson is the winner of this event.
Brian Shaw would tear his hamstring, a terrible sign for his future in this event, his career, and quality of life, at least for the coming months. This injury would prove to be a major setback for arguably the best strongman of all time. However, despite all the troubles this tear would bring him, it would pale in comparison to the trials that preceded the performance of a lifetime. But, in this moment, although something felt seriously off, Shaw didn't quite know exactly what the problem was. Prior to the competition, he was getting treatment for hip pain, and due to the rush of competition, and perhaps a strong mental commitment to already working through pain, Shaw chose to stay in the competition with him unknowingly having a torn hamstring. In the following event, the Husafell stone, only hours later, competitors would have to carry a 400-pound stone and complete as many laps as they could around a short course. Shaw would attempt to carry this extreme weight on a torn hamstring as far as he could, in order to stay within striking distance of his main competitor for the competition. However, it was apparent on his face that he was working through some serious pain, beyond what strongman competitors normally deal with.
He's done a lot of carrying events.
Shaw looking like he's starting to slip a little bit.
Shaw would carry the 400-pound stone over 104 feet, incredible compared to the average person, but he would place 8th out of 9 people in this event, falling further behind the leader than he was prior. Going into the next day of competition, he still refused to give up. The third event involves wooden logs that require over 500 pounds of force in order to move. Competitors have 60 seconds to do as many rotations as they can. Shaw would again place 8th in this event, moving him to 7th place on the leaderboards, putting him on track for his worst performance on the world circuit. A man that once stood unchallenged at the top of the strongman world was now falling before everyone's eyes. But he didn't want to accept his fate, as he continued to compete. The following event was the Austrian Oak, which is when competitors take a giant wooden log and lift it above their heads. The competitors would have the choice between 2 logs, one being 386 pounds and the heavier one weighing at 430 pounds. Brian Shaw would pick the heavier of the 2.
And one down, yes, for Brian Shaw. Crowd trying to help out Brian.
And would go on to do 1 rep. He would come to try his hardest, but it wasn't enough, as he placed 5th, which caused him to finally budge and withdraw from the competition, likely due to the frustration that his body wouldn't do what he used to be able to do anymore. But what he used to be able to do was nothing short of amazing. Frankly speaking, Brian Shaw was born to be a strongman, growing almost a foot taller than both his parents. He started to tend over to the sport while competing as a college basketball player. In his first ever competition, 2005 Denver's Strongest Man, he would win, despite the fact that he had no formal training. And only 2 years later, he would qualify for the World's Strongest Man competition. The journey to qualifying for this event is often a marathon, but Brian was quickly sprinting up the mountain. At the 2008 competition, Shaw would get third in the preliminary rounds, being eliminated before the second half of the competition. However, Brian's climb up the mountain was only getting started. In the 2009 iteration of the event, he would climb up from getting eliminated in the group stage to qualifying for the main events and making the podium. The only two people who placed above him were arguably the two best competitors from this era. And after this rise, it only seemed inevitable for Shaw to stand at the top of the World's Strongest Man podium.
Up the podium. In the air right here. A lot of tension, a lot of anticipation.
And Shaw is certainly the heir apparent. He has the skill.
And Shadeus is down.
So 108.89, plenty of power.
Just goes back to the fact that strongman is a big guy sport, and there's none bigger than the Big Shaw.
He sets the new fastest time.
For Shaw, and he drops two.
Well, they're not going to beat Shadeus. Here's Brian Shaw struggling to get to the finish line.
Oh, this is painful to watch. This is heartbreaking to read for Shaw. I can't believe his grip just isn't holding up.
Across the line, that means 2 events in a row for the Big Z.
Strongest man.
The Wolfmen even at 9, the reps to beat 10, put it by Mikel Maklaya, number 11. And Brian Shaw and
In the final event, the Atlas Stones, which involves lifting 5 stones ranging from 220 to 407 pounds, Brian Shaw was 2 points behind the last year's champion, meaning he would have to beat him by 2 places in order to tie for first, or by more in order to win the World's Strongest Man title all for himself. The two would be the last competitors in the event, and with the world title on the line, for the first time in his career, Brian Shaw would push for the top.
The slightest bobble from Shadeus could be all the opening that Shaw needs to take the title.
And Shaw's got a window.
Yeah, this could be all it takes for the big man to pull away and win the whole thing.
He stops the clock at 27.1.
Although the competitors tied, the tiebreaker would involve comparing their placings from the previous 6 events.
Shadeus bear hug. Shaw really locking the bag in high above his hips, carrying it in tight.
Well, this is going to be close. 58.72 put up by Ortmeyer. And Brian Shaw is right there.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe that.
So he's got to replace the bag, and I think he thought he was done.
And Shadeus is down.
So 108.89 after Brian Shaw was so close to taking the win.
In the tiebreaks, Big Z would win. If Brian Shaw didn't drop his bag in the first event, he would have been the 2010 World's Strongest Man in his 3rd ever appearance. A world title coming down to such a small mistake was heartbreaking and would potentially be extremely demotivating for many people. However, Shaw would have his own unique mentality to this setback.
I've been focused on 2011 World's Strongest Man since the day that the 2010 World's Strongest Man ended. I've replayed that loading race so many different times about what happened with being on the podium, getting the 2nd place trophy, and I had to look at Shadeus get the 1st place trophy. To come that close and not win was kind of a heartbreaker for me. I kind of put it in my mind at that moment that I was coming back to win.
I would say I tried to take it as a positive because it made me work incredibly hard. And it's something that I thought back on.
Shaw would cruise through the qualifying stages of the 2011 World's Strongest Man event, but the final would put him on a collision course with a man that had prevented his rise to the top for the past 2 years, the veteran champion, Big Z. Brian Shaw would come out strong in the first of 6 events, the frame carry, where competitors have to lift 825 pounds and walk nearly 100 feet. Those who finish the fastest will receive the most points. Shaw would finish 4th with an impressive time of 27 seconds, over 13 seconds before Big Z would finish. However, many of the competitors were unable to finish the entire 100 feet, meaning Shaw would only have a 1-point lead over him. In the second event, the Super Yoke, competitors had to lift nearly 1,000 pounds on their back and walk around 80 feet. And for this event, the organizers once again had the two favorites competing right next to one another. Something Brian Shaw would use to push himself to his full potential, as he would come to blaze through this event and place second, securing a 4-point lead over his rival. The third event was the truck pull, where competitors have a harness tied to them in a 22,000-pound truck that they have to pull 100 feet. And once again, the two favorites would put on an astounding performance. Shaw would move up to first place with his performance, and would grow his lead to 5 points over Big Z. But Big Z would show that a veteran never goes down without a fight. Lifting 970 pounds in the deadlift event, the most out of everyone, and cutting Brian Shaw's lead down to 3.5 points. And in the log lift event, Big Z would crush the rest of the competition, completing 10 reps over the head with the weight, twice as much as Brian Shaw was able to complete. And this performance would tie him to Brian Shaw with only one event to go, the Atlas Stones. This time around, there would be no tie possible. Whoever would put the 5 stones on their pedestals faster would become the 2011 World's Strongest Man.
Will be the champion. Shaw sprinting away, almost dunks that first ball on top of the platform, and Zabiscus at the moment is a whisker behind. But what a way to finish. The legendary Atlas Stones will find out who is the true world's strongest man, and it looks like Shaw. He's going to win it, and he wins it well. That is a champion's performance, and the 2-time champion is beaten.
Brian Shaw was now finally crowned as the world's strongest man for the first time, and as time would go to show, he would become even stronger. After getting 4th at the following year's competition, he wouldn't miss the podium at any World's Strongest Man competition for the next 6 years. In fact, he wouldn't miss the podium at any competition he would appear at, taking 16 out of his 24 appearances, 3 of those being World's Strongest Man titles. In addition, he would go on to set numerous world records in different events, such as a 61,000-pound truck pull uphill for 23 meters and an 850-pound car deadlift for 12 reps. In fact, the sheer number of world records he broke during his career is an incredibly long list. As 2019 hit, Shaw was still in his prime. However, as previously mentioned, he tore his hamstring at the Arnold Strongman Classic that year and put his career in question. Shaw didn't have retirement in his mind though, as after a couple months off in order to recover, he would return for the World's Strongest Man competition in June, although he would only place 6th, his worst performance since 2008. At this point in his career, many of the people he once competed against had since retired, and he was now one of, if not the most famous strongman in the world, and the attention he was able to bring to the sport made him an icon, so much that in 2020, he created a prestigious competition on the world circuit, known as the Shaw Classic. The Shaw Classic differs in its event choice slightly from many of the other well-known competitions, as the events tend to test raw strength rather than strength combined with some cardio, and because of this, the weights at this event tend to be heavier. Shaw would use this event to prove that he was still a top competitor after fully recovering from his hamstring tear, as he managed to lift 1,041 pounds in the deadlift and win the entire competition with a decent lead. Most competitions named after people tend to be because the person is retired, and their legacy is already completely written. However, at this point in his career, Shaw had enough of a legacy to warrant a competition be named after him and had the longevity in order to win it. Going into the 2020s, Shaw was still a top competitor in the 3rd decade he was competing in, but Father Time was slowly catching up to him.
Look at the speed of Tom Stolman, the albatross. He's ahead of Shaw by some distance. Oh my goodness, first time he takes 2.
As after a strong second place finish at the 2021 World's Strongest Man, he would place 4th in 2022. And the hopes of him achieving a 5th World's Strongest Man title were diminishing. A couple months prior to the 2023 iteration, Shaw would announce that his 16th time competing would be his last. At this point in his career, he was now 41 years old, way past the normal retirement age for strongmen, and most competitors' retirement was preceded by a decline in their performance. However, Shaw would mention that he felt like this was perhaps the last year where he felt like he had a chance at winning, so he wanted to give it his all, against the odds, in order to retire on top. His training for the competition would be the most intense he had done in years, as he would leave it all on the line, and push through pain like never before.
It's always been about hard work, it's always been about dedication, it's always been about working harder than anybody else out there.
Unfortunately, for some reason, a pain in his leg would continue to persist and grow until even a man as stubbornly competitive as Brian Shaw chose to get it checked out. Brian Shaw would be told that he had a serious leg infection that possibly would require amputation if any blood clot or abscess got into his bloodstream. He would be told to stay to bed rest for the time being, as he was injected with large quantities of antibiotics to hopefully prevent the infection from spreading. While on the hospital bed, his mind was still on the 2023 World's Strongest Man competition. His wife would come to bring him extra food, in order for him to still eat his 5 meals a day, and Shaw would make the push to walk laps around the hospital with his IV still in order to keep his cardio. Shaw never ruled out competing at the 2023 competition, despite it only being 3 months away.
Dear Dad, we hope you get better.
Sure.
Helen,
Does it say love?
love, Dad.
You know, one of the quotes that's popped into my head that I've loved throughout my entire career, whenever I've had to go through difficult things, is adversity causes some men to break and others to break records. And
In the preheats, Shaw would demonstrate dominance in his key events, the deadlift, log lift, and kettlebell toss, winning each of the events. However, he would ultimately place second in his preheat group by only half a point due to a poor performance in the Conan's wheel. In most previous World's Strongest Man events, the 2 top placers in each preheat group would advance to the final. However, in this iteration of the event, the 2nd and 3rd place finishers would compete in a stone off. The 3rd place competitor could choose any of the 5 Atlas stones to push over the bar. Then the 2nd place competitor would have to pick it up and push it back. Wherever the stone ends up last would cause that competitor to be eliminated. And now, Brian Shaw's competition life was on the line.
Both men consciously relying on that tacky on their hands and arms, that pine resin.
Yeah, that doesn't mix well with sweat either, and there's some lashings of it being hit on the stone as well. These guys, and this is rep number 6 on the final stone.
Well, Heinle exhausted.
That's his disadvantage. It'll always be 1 extra for him to get it over.
How much longer can this possibly go on? Goodness me! What a return from the Estonian.
His legs are wobbling though. It feels a bit like a boxer on his last legs there for Heinle. I'm not sure he'll have another one in him. He's got to nail this. Getting a better grip. He can still do it though.
Brian Shaw would win the stone off with 11 repetitions of a 395-pound stone, in order to make it to the finals in what came to be regarded as the greatest stone-off of all time. Shaw's competition in the final 6 events would be higher than ever before, as the new generation of strongmen led the pack in the first event. Shaw would carry the 420-pound shield 128 feet. However, he would end up placing 8th in the event. In the next event, he managed to keep his hopes of winning alive, showing shades of his prime, pulling 778 pounds for 7 reps, tying for second place in the event. However, the lead for the competition had placed first in both of these events, meaning Shaw had a 9.5 point deficit going into the third event. Shaw needed a strong placement in the third event, the Fingal's Fingers, to keep his hopes of catching up alive. And in it, Shaw was unable to complete the third finger and would place 7th, effectively ending his chance of winning the competition.
You know, I wasn't envisioning it ending like this.
Shaw would finish in 7th place for his last World's Strongest Man competition, and all of his competitors gave their respects to what he had brought for the sport. The new generation of strongmen which he inspired dominated this competition, with Mitchell Hooper leading the pack, taking a dominant victory. The new generation of strongmen were characterized by having supreme knowledge about all facets of the sport, which proved to give them advantage against the old guard. But as history stands, Brian Shaw would retire from the World's Strongest Man competition with a 7th place performance. But that wouldn't be his last competition. Shaw would announce that his official final competition would be at the 2023 Shaw Classic, 4 months in the future, and this would put him on one final collision course with the new generation of strongmen. As a result, Shaw would be able to put his all into training for one last event. The landscape of strongman was now much different than it had been in the previous decades that Shaw had competed. He was no longer the favorite or the young up-and-comer. He was now the veteran that had to prove he could still compete with the new up-and-comers, and that would prove to be perhaps the biggest challenge of his career. The competition was an invitational style event with no preheats. Only 8 events where competitors were given points based off of their ranking. The World's Strongest Man would start off this competition well in the first event, the log lift, but unlike last time, Brian Shaw would be right on his tail. The gauntlet of events that laid ahead of the competitors would weed out those not at their peak shape. At the halfway point in the competition, only 3 competitors still had a realistic chance of winning: Trey Mitchell, Mitchell Hooper, and Brian Shaw. Where Brian Shaw fell behind the pack at World's Strongest Man, he proved he could still stick around with the best this time around. The 7th event would be the bag toss, a similar but more difficult version of the kettlebell toss present at World's Strongest Man. But as always, this event was Brian Shaw's to dominate, and for the first time this competition, Hooper would have a weak event, putting an unexpected 6-point lead in Shaw's favor going into the last event. The last event would be the most taxing of all of them, as it would be basically 2-in-1. The first part would be 2 Fingal's Fingers, weighing around 300 pounds, and the second part would involve carrying 2 blocks, one being 550 pounds and the other being 600, up a flight of stairs. The event would have these two be the last to compete. Given the lead that he had, Shaw needed to complete the first half of the medley, then make it up 8 flights of stairs in order to guarantee a win, while Hooper would be pushing for all 10 flights in a fast time in order to secure first, and hoped Shaw would place below 6th in order to secure the victory. In this moment, the final step of Shaw's legacy was in his own hands. If he could muster one last additional reserve of strength and finish the medley, his career would have the perfect last dance.
Both men making quick work, second finger, 330 pounds. Boy, Hooper's doing a great job.
There's Floyd. Can Hooper finish on that moment of winning the last event? It's looking possible.
If Brian gets this up, I think it's done. As long as he gets past 2 steps. Here comes Shaw. Look at that. Mitchell Hooper's like, you know what? Let's cheer the big man on. He's got 36 seconds left in his career. He's got 2 steps, make it 1.
Let's finish it.
1 step to go for the big man. Got it.
Your final contest ever, and you go out on top, the strongest man on earth! And that positive attitude and that positive momentum that each and every one of you can build in your own life will carry over, and we can do so many great things in this world if we keep that mentality and keep striving for that each and every day. And I would encourage all of you to look in the mirror, challenge yourself to be better each and every day, and it will result in very, very good things. I love all of you. I appreciate all of you more than you will ever know. And go out and be great.